Hello everybody, it's Michael from Replica Airguns with another instructional video. In this video we're going to talk about why is my blank gun not working. Now I don't like to do troubleshooting too often. I don't like to answer those questions. The problem is doing any type of technical or mechanical troubleshooting over the internet or over your phone. It's pretty frustrating for everybody because a lot of times you kind of need to be there in person to really get an idea of what's wrong. That's why you don't call up your mechanic and he helps you fix your car over the phone. You got to take your car to him, right? It's the same with guns, it's the same with technology, it's all kind of the same. But there are often common issues, and so we'll take a look at some of those common issues with blank guns. Now, this isn't going to cover everything, it's just going to sort of scratch the surface of what I would consider to be some typical issues of why your blank gun may not be operating properly. Okay, so let's first address why your semi-auto blank gun may not be cycling or ejecting shells. So we're not talking about revolvers here, okay, because they're a little tight. Revolvers don't cycle, and what I mean by that is there's no slide that moves back and forth that needs to eject or pick up a shell, right? This is a very simple operation. You pull the trigger or pull the hammer back, release the trigger, and it's going to fire a blank, right? As long as the cylinder is rotating and this firing pin is hitting the firing or the primer pin, the primer on your blank, and everything is working that way, then your revolver will typically operate properly. We'll get into reasons why blanks aren't firing later, but you're not going to have nearly as many issues with revolvers. So one very common reason why a blank gun may not be cycling the shell, so semi-auto version like a semi-auto pistol, so it may not be cycling the shells properly, is because the owner has removed the barrel restrictor plug. Now not all blank guns have these, so I'm going to show you a couple guns that don't have them. Now if we look in here, we got to try and get in here. All right, it's a little tough, but you can see there's no plug. There's just the metal rod there. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. There's no plug in that one. Now if we look at the Zeraki, same thing. Hard to see in there, but there's just a metal rod. There's no actual plug. Now if we look at this Eckel Special 99, you'll see that there's this little plug. It's actually got basically you'd have to take it out with a screwdriver. It's hard to see in there, but hopefully you can see it there a little bit, right? So you can unscrew that plug. I'm going to do that on my Rite just to show you kind of what we're talking about. If I can find my, there it is. Thought I'd put that somewhere else. So I'm going to unscrew this plug for you. Okay. And so why do people take these out? This little guy right here. Let's put this back on the table. I do not want to lose this. But why do people take this out? They take it out because they feel that all of a sudden the barrel opens up and looks more realistic. You're not going to see that plug in there, right? So that plug's right near the end, and some people think that, oh, with the plug in there it doesn't look as realistic. I'm going to remove that plug. What does this plug do? Okay, what is the function of this plug? Basically, when it's in there, it makes the barrel opening smaller diameter. What does that smaller diameter do? It creates back pressure in the gun because we're not pushing a bullet. There's no bullet in a blank, so there's nothing to create back pressure in the gun other than a little bit of force or some force from the blank firing the gunpowder, but it's not really pushing against anything. There's no or very little back pressure. So this little plug allows for back pressure in the gun. You take that plug out, next to no back pressure, now your gun doesn't fire properly. So what's going to happen is the slide might come back a little bit, but there's not enough back pressure to make it go all the way back. So the shell doesn't have enough room to extract. You also don't have enough of slide motion to go back and pick up another shell and allow it to go into the breech. So the semi-auto pistol will not function. Now some blank guns require blanks with more gunpowder than others. Again, the additional internal pressure forces the slide all the way back. Now if the blank that you're using doesn't have enough gunpowder in it, then of course only a partial slide motion happens, so similar to not having enough back pressure because you remove that restrictor. And so the discharged shell may not eject properly, it may not clear the ejection port, so you're going to have to manually actually cycle that, right? And of course that's not what we want. We want the gun to function properly, to fully cycle back and forth, eject, and pick up a new round. So again, not enough gunpowder. Some shells are a little hotter than others. Some have more powder in them than others. And if you have a heavy slide spring, it's going to require a blank with a little more pop to it. Now, something that's really easy to try if your blank gun isn't functioning properly is just clean it out. Clean the parts, the mechanical parts, areas where the slide is resting on. Clean it out really good. You could have a lot of gunpowder and grit and dirt in there. Lubricate the gun properly. If it's dirty or rusty or just not moving back and forth, if the slide feels sticky in any way, then again, that's going to stop your gun from functioning properly. It's going to stop the slide from cycling all the way, and again, it's not going to eject or pick up a shell properly. Now, another thing that might be happening is your extractor may not be, and this is the extractor right here. Okay, this little guy right here. It grabs the shell. So the shell, once it comes forward, as it comes back, it sort of grabs one side of the shell, basically the shell that's been fired, and it just flicks it out of the way, right? It just grabs the edge and pops it out. And you're going to find that on pretty much every semi-auto pistol in one way or another. There's the extractor on this one. Okay, right there. Some of them are going to be on the top. Some of them are going to be on the side. So this is Zeraki M906. All right, there's the extractor there. All right, and see if we can find one with one on the top here. There's one with one on the top, and again, little echo. Right, it's got the extractor on the top. And if that's, and this basically is going to fling it straight up in the air. If that's not gripping it properly, if that little edge there, the part that grabs the shell, is worn down, then it's not going to fling that shell out of your gun, right? And so if the shell doesn't get flung out of the gun, if it's not extracting, then when your slide goes all the way back, tries to pick up a new round, it may pick up a new round, but it's just going to get all caught up in that ejection port area because it has nowhere to go, right? Now, one last possibility is your slide spring, right? Your spring inside the gun is, let's just open this up a little bit here. Okay, so this guy right here, the spring is potentially too stiff, right? If it's really, really heavy, then no matter how much power that blank has, no matter how much gunpowder it has in it, this slide spring, and even if you have enough back pressure, the spring might just be too heavy, and that does happen sometimes. Sometimes the manufacturer just gets it wrong and they don't put the proper spring in there. It's just too heavy. Maybe they put like the real gun spring in, or similar to a real gun spring. With blank guns, usually the springs have to be a little bit lighter. Again, you're not pushing around out of that barrel. You're not using as much pressure, as much gunpowder typically, so you don't need as heavy of a spring. So really all you're going to be able to do there is somehow get a slightly weaker spring and give that a try. All right, problem number 2. Why are my blanks not firing? Now this is a situation where you pull the trigger and nothing happens. Now let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. Did you put blanks in your gun? Are you using new blanks that haven't been previously fired? Did you chamber the first round in your semi-auto pistol? So a semi-auto pistol, for instance, right, even if the hammer's back, if I haven't chambered a round yet, if there's no round in the chamber, when I fire that, nothing's going to happen, right? So you need to cycle the slide. You'll see a shell pop up. It'll get chambered into the breech. It's ready for the first shot. And then after that, everything should happen in semi-auto mode. So the slide should kick back, eject, pick up a new shell. You shouldn't have to manually rack the slide anymore. All right, with that out of the way, let's look at some other reasons why your blank gun may not be firing a blank. Perhaps the firing pin is broken. Now, most blank guns are not made out of carbon steel. Even important parts like the firing pin and hammers and all those things still are made out of lesser quality materials than you'd find in real guns, and they are prone to breakage. I have seen even a Zeraki makes pretty darn good blank guns. I've seen a broken firing pin in one of those. It does happen. Now I'm going to show you this one just because it's pretty easy to show you what I'm talking about. So here's your firing pin. All right, so there's your firing pin, right? And you can kind of like, I'm going to manually just give it a little push, but you can see in the front there, you can see how it's coming out. Now if you give it a little push and nothing's happening, or there's no little bit coming out there, then that's going to be a major problem. If that little firing pin isn't coming forward and hitting the primer, or if it's maybe too short, maybe it's worn down and it's not hitting the primer hard enough, then that could be a problem, right? So check that guy out, make sure your firing pin is all functioning properly, isn't worn down, isn't broken. Another possibility is perhaps the blanks you're using just don't work that well with your gun. Again, some guns, they just have a lighter firing pin. They don't hit the primer as hard as other guns. Some primers require they get hit with a certain amount of force or they just don't work. And this is the same with real guns. Some guns, especially if you're looking at rimfire guns like 22s, can be really picky, and even though you'll see that the primer hit the rim, it just didn't hit it hard enough. That can happen with center fire guns too. That can happen with blank guns. So maybe try different ammunition and see if that works for you. All right, another potential problem is the trigger or hammer of your blank gun is not operating properly. You know the blanks are good. You know you've put ammunition in the gun. You know you've cycled the gun. Everything seems to be copacetic, but for whatever reason, you pull the trigger, nothing happens. For whatever reason, maybe you draw that hammer back, maybe it's slipping. There's so many possibilities when it comes to that. And, to be honest, that's getting into the sort of more mechanical and technical problems. And I would recommend you take that gun into a gunsmith. Gunsmiths can work on blank guns. Pretty much they're just like a real gun, but they just shoot blanks. So they should have no problem working on a blank gun for you. That said, I have had issues with, for instance, the Special 99, this Echo Special 99, and the problem I had is I'd draw the hammer back and it would just slip off. Even when I went into, if I went like this and the slide came back, it would literally just, the hammer would come back, and you'd almost get an out of control gun that way, or you'd have it cocked back and it could slip off at any moment. Not cool, very dangerous. The gun could fire at any moment, even with the hammer back, and potentially even in safe, I'm not sure, but definitely with the hammer back off safe. What was the problem? Well, basically, it's hard to explain because I'm not a gunsmith, but when the hammer's back, the trigger kind of rests on this little, I call it a table, right? And so when you pull the trigger, it just clears that table just enough to allow the hammer to drop. And right near the edge of that table is kind of like a straight edge. And what was happening was, again, these guns are not made out of, regular gun quality carbon steel, so the materials are softer. What happened is that little lip or that table, which should have had a straight edge, had rounded a bit. And so it was just slipping off that round edge, or that straight edge, which had become round. And so all I did is I just filed it back into more of a straight edge, and that seemed to fix the problem. Okay, for how long, who knows, but it is something that does happen with some guns. You may or may not be able to get in there and fix it. When you do get into the hammer and trigger components, you do have to pretty much take a lot of the gun apart to get to those parts, and springs are involved. Putting it back together may be complex, so don't do that unless you're really mechanically inclined. Another question I get is, why does the flame come out of the top of my blank gun and not the front? Now hear me out on this one. This is not a problem with your blank gun. This simply means you have a top venting blank gun instead of a front firing blank gun, and it's working perfectly fine. Now the reason for this is some countries only allow top venting guns to be imported. Some countries may only allow front venting guns to be imported. For instance, here in Canada, we can only have the front venting or front firing blank guns that have flare adapters, because our blank guns are imported for the purpose of using them as signaling or flare devices. They're really not supposed to be imported or used for any other reason. Although, as you can see on the table, I've been able to acquire blank guns. Some of them have been in the country for quite some time. Some of them were imported legally throughout the years. Now another question I get is, can I convert my top venting blank gun to a front venting blank gun? Now I really do not recommend altering a blank gun in any way, as you may be breaking some laws in your country, and it is possible that if you do something to your gun, it could malfunction in a very bad way, so altering your blank gun is not recommended. Now in theory, I suppose it may be possible to switch your gun over from being top venting to front firing, but you would need to allow for just the right amount of back pressure. Again, without that right amount of back pressure, nothing's going to work properly, so a wide open barrel is not going to work unless it's a revolver. Now you cannot simply remove the red plug and bingo, you have a front firing blank gun, because in most cases, top venting guns have a fully plugged front portion of the barrel. So you'd have to drill that out, and then you're going to have to figure out a way to seal up that top cutout area as well. So you're talking about pretty much replacing the barrel entirely. You're going to have to be almost a gunsmith to do that. And again, I don't feel it's worth it. Just leave the gun the way it is. Again, you could be breaking laws. You could be getting yourself into some real hurt there if the gun doesn't fire properly, maybe blows up in your hand. So don't do it. I don't recommend you do it. Hopefully this has helped some of you with the blank gun issues you might be having. Now if you're looking for a blank gun, make sure to come down to replicaairguns.com and have a look in our blank gun areas of our online stores. Alright, thanks for watching another Replica Airguns video. Don't forget to subscribe and check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Username is Replica Airguns. Also come on down to replicaairguns.com where I have articles, posts, reviews. I'll have a written version of this video there too for you. And of course we have our Canada and US online stores where we sell air guns, BB guns, pellet guns, blank guns, knives, and other accessories. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.